Good afternoon and welcome to our next installment of Cooking with Spirit. As promised last week, we're going to begin with just a picture of how the finished product turned out of lemon rosemary chicken with prosciutto wrapped green beans and smoked salmon salad rolls. I have to tell you, it was really delicious. Well, I'm pre-recording and doing the cooking in the rectory kitchen tonight because the ongoing challenges of the internet in the parish kitchen just have made this rather difficult. Now, what I'm going to make tonight is simple, incredibly simple, but sometimes, taking those comfort foods that we have all loved for all of our life and kicking them up a notch to make them taste remarkable is just a great way to go about things. And for me, one of my favorite meals will always be soup and a sandwich. And so today I was thinking, what would make a really good soup and sandwich meal that's kicked up a notch? And the thought that came to me is, why don't I make a butternut squash and apple soup coupled with a brie and apple grilled cheese? Two of my favorites, and what a great pairing to make a really good dinner. So we will start by putting about a tablespoon of olive oil into the bottom of our pan. And I've done all of the pre-prep because I don't think there's anything the least bit edifying about watching me chop onions or cut up a butternut squash. And so what we're going to do, we are going to add one whole, roughly chopped white onion and the approximate equivalent of 2 cloves of minced garlic. I likely will have put in more than 2 cloves worth, but I really love the taste and the smell of garlic cooking, and so I don't mind having a little extra. For those, like Ruth mentioned last week, who really can't have garlic with allergies and such, this recipe is equally good as just a butternut squash without the garlic. And so we're just going to saute those onions and the garlic until they become nice and fragrant and a little bit soft. It'll only be a few minutes. The nice thing about pre-recording like this is that it gives me the opportunity to also show you the finished product when I'm all done. So at this point we will just fry up those onions a little bit and the garlic. Now I have to tell you, when we get to the sandwich, when I make a grilled cheese sandwich, it's always done with real butter. I remember my grandmother, one of the most beautiful women I ever knew, and yet all of her life was spent worrying about every morsel that crossed her lips. She would worry that some doctor somewhere had said that butter wasn't good for her and that she should switch over to margarine. Through watching her, I've come to the conclusion myself that if you cut butter out of your diet, you're still not going to live forever. It's just going to feel like forever. I'm a strong believer. Bring out that beautiful flavor of butter. Already the smell is just amazing. There are very few things to compare with the smell of onions and garlic as they're being sauteed. I knew a realtor once who said if you wanted to move a house quite quickly, before you leave on an open house day, fry up a few onions in the pan and leave that smell hanging in the air. Of course, another person said make an apple pie. So now I have pre-prepared and cubed about a 3-pound butternut squash. Cut it up into small cubes, largely because I have found that it's better for me to take additional time in prep work so that the meal itself cooks more quickly, because I am very much committed to living as green as I possibly can. And so if I can do a little extra work, but as a result cut down on the amount of effect that my cooking time has on the environment, I think it's an overall win. So we're going to add these small pieces of butternut squash into the mix, as well as 1 diced cooking apple. I used Fuji's, which cooked down very, very nicely. I'll add all of that in. And we're going to add about a tablespoon of freshly grated ginger. We're going to add about a half a teaspoon of freshly ground black pepper. Now, ordinarily I would say a teaspoon of salt, but as I've told you before, Becky and I try very hard to limit our sodium intake, and so I've used about a half a teaspoon. And then a half a teaspoon of cinnamon, a pinch of red pepper flakes, and a half a teaspoon of turmeric. And we're going to just stir that up with the onions for about 7 or 8 minutes until the butternut squash begins to soften. So for tonight's napkin fold, I'm looking forward and anticipating Easter with this one. It's very simple, but it has to be done with paper napkins, and usually I won't use paper napkins because I am just passionately opposed to using a whole lot of single-use paper and plastic products. But unfortunately, the weight of cloth napkins makes this one impossible. So as we're continuing down the path that's going to lead us to Easter, I'm going to make an Easter bunny for our napkin fold tonight. We'll take the purple napkin, lay it over the white napkin, and then we're going to take the whole thing and diagonally fold it to the top point. Make sure you get a nice crease on your folds. It'll always make the end product look a lot better. Now we'll take the bottom corner, fold it up to the center, and then that fold we will also fold up to the center. Flip it around, and we're going to do the same on the opposite side. Fold and crease really well, and the same on the opposite side. Now take it and fold it so that it's like this. Now as well, I have a plastic Easter egg and about a 9-inch piece of thin ribbon. I'm going to place the plastic Easter egg at the center of the napkin and bring up both sides so that they come up roughly equal. And now I'll take the ribbon and tie it around. Tie it good and tight and put a bow in it. There we are. And now we'll just open up our bunny's ears. And there we have it. Generally, I would put a few candies inside of the egg for my nieces and nephews or my granddaughter to find when they're having their dinner. And I almost always, in setting the table, put this inside of everyone's wine glass at the table, and it makes a beautiful presentation. Okay, so while I've edited out, watching me stir the pot for 8 minutes, it's time to move on to the next step. And that step is a pretty simple one. We're going to add about 1 liter of vegetable broth. Ordinarily, I would have made my own vegetable broth from my leftover vegetable clippings, but at present I didn't really have enough, so I've got to use store-bought. But I always have to be so careful about low sodium and gluten-free because, as crazy as it sounds, a lot of broth available in the grocery store has wheat in it, which makes it really bad for me. So now, as well as the vegetable broth, we're going to add a cup of 2% milk. And once again, I'll edit out a few minutes while that's brought to a boil and while the squash finishes cooking and becomes really nice and soft. Each week, you will have noticed that I have a symbol that helps me in my theological reflection. This week, the symbol I'd like to use is my own wristwatch. Years ago, my organist at St. George's of Forest Hill gave me the gift of a book which had come to mean a lot to him. The title was In Praise of Slow. The premise of the book was that we spend so much of our time enslaved by the time clock, and that in order to draw ourselves closer to God, we need to take the opportunity to step back, to slow down, to take the time to intentionally connect with God. There are many times when at the end of the day, my dear wife will come home and she'll say, "How was your day?" And my response will always be, "I've worked so hard all day, but I feel like I really didn't accomplish much." Is it always necessary to accomplish much? I think that book should also have a companion book called In Praise of Simple. Back on Ash Wednesday, I shared with a few people in the church that years ago, as one Lenten discipline, I committed myself each day to look around my home and see a place in the house that looked cluttered, and then to go into that space with 3 shopping bags. 1 to be thrown away, 1 to be given away, and 1 to be kept. Somehow in that discipline of simplifying, of decluttering my life, of not so much being a slave of stuff, I also found that there was more room for growing the relationship with God. There is certainly something to be said about finding ways both to live more simply and to live a little more slowly, and to make room in our everyday lives for God. So now I have boiled this until all of the squash is really softened. And so now I'm just going to take my immersion blender and begin to liquefy it all. Turned the heat off to it, but at this point it's still bubbling quite a bit. I'm going to move it right off of the So now we'll just get down to work on the sandwich. Now we want to keep a fairly low temperature because, of course, Brie is a soft cheese to begin with. This sandwich I've made, looks like Lucy gets a piece of apple. She's not going to be sad about that. I've made it with carbonate gluten-free bread. As I've said before, I like to be very careful about the number of carbs in my diet so that I can keep my sugar low. And of course, I have to be gluten-free. And so carbonate makes perhaps the best gluten-free bread that I've come across. Most of them I find are pretty bleak. But this has the extra bonus that it's also low in carbohydrates. So we'll just get this heated nicely. Of course, I likely don't need to do a demonstration on how to make a grilled cheese sandwich, but I'll just show you the inside of the sandwich itself. Just a nice thick coating of Brie with lots of slices of those beautiful Fuji apples as well. So we'll just get them to a really nice golden brown. Perhaps while that's happening, I will get out the bowls and serve up the soup in order to be ready to have our dinner. There it is. Hard as I tried, I seem to see a couple of lumps of butternut squash in the soup. I really like it to be nice and creamy and even, but invariably there are a couple pieces that manage to sneak by. Certainly hear the butter melting here for this sandwich. I'm just going to take these 2 bowls of soup over to the table while the pan continues to heat up for us. Not quite golden brown on that side, but just about. So we'll give it a few more moments. I may even turn it up just a little bit in order to toast it a little bit faster. There, we got beautiful color on that side now. It'll just be a moment longer, and then while I toast up the second one, I can also get the plate ready for Becky to have her dinner. So here we have our finished product, a butternut squash and apple soup with brie and apple grilled cheese. It will be an absolute treat, but I have to warn you that this is a very filling meal. You may want more, but 1 bowl I think will be sufficient.